Well, hello Instagrammers and YouTubers alike, and welcome back to Retro Direction. And I'm Michael, I'm your host for this evening. And welcome to the review of the Sega Saturn version of Time Warner Interactive's Virtua Racing. And what a great game it is. Now, I'm going to sound biased when I review this game, so I'm going to try and make it as unbiased a review as is most humanly possible. But anyway, let's go on with the show. First of all, a little bit of history for you. And back in 1992 in Japanese arcades, that's when we first saw Virtua Racing. And it was really very impressive indeed. It was the most revolutionary 3D graphic game, you could say, in particular when it came to racing titles. It was really very impressive indeed. And I remember I was still living back home in Italy then, and I saw it in the arcades and in the sit-down cabinet, and I did try it out. I wasn't very good, but I was just blown away. I just couldn't get over these graphics. And I remember saying all the way back in 92, look at how far these games have come. And yeah, that's all the way back then. Now you can imagine how we're thinking, much along the same lines today in 2019. But anyway, on with the show. Now, there were... Hello, it's my reflection. Now, there have been quite a few, surprisingly, quite a few home conversions of this title. The most notable being the first one. In 1994, they converted it to the humble Sega Mega Drive, or Sega Genesis as it's known in the US. And with the help of the SVP chip, or Sega Virtual Processor, that turned your humble Mega Drive into a polygon crunching monster. And that game was pushing 9,000 polygons per second, and it was a good straight port of the arcade game, complete with the 3 arcade tracks. They were split up into 3 different difficulty levels. You had Big Forest, which was the easy one, the intermediate was Bay Bridge, and Acropolis was the tough one for experts, and it was a more challenging track with very, very tight turns and very special landmarks on each track. But if you haven't played this game before, I won't spoil too much, but I will show you a little bit of it. Anyway, now, yes, the other couple of conversions for the home, we had the Sega 32X was a little bit closer to the arcade in terms of visuals, and it had 2 extra tracks and 2 extra cars, besides the Formula 1 car that was in the original one. In the arcade game and the Mega Drive version, in the 32X you had the addition of the prototype car and the stock car. And then we had a conversion, believe it or not, of course this one here for the Saturn, but then we had one for the PS2 under the title of Sega Ages in Japan. You can get it in the UK as well. I think it's called Sega Arcade Classics, and it's got a selection of different arcade games such as Space Harrier, Outrun. It's got Golden Axe, and of course Virtua Racing. I think it's got a couple of new tracks on it as well, and the graphics look really good, very close to the arcade, if not the same as. But anyway, the Sega Saturn version is a very impressive game. Now, compared to other versions, the Sega Saturn has a Grand Prix mode where you can race a full season of Virtua Racing, and it's got 7 more tracks, and it's got 3 extra cars compared to the 32X version. Anyway, and sorry, the original arcade. So you've got 10 tracks in total. Now we're going to go into practice mode so we can have a look at what it has to offer. So the loading times aren't too lengthy. So here are the cars. Now you've got your stock car. Now let's go to this car here. Now this is the go-kart. When you select Grand Prix mode, you start with the go-kart. It's really fun to control. And it only does about 90 miles an hour, but it's just really, really fun. Then you get the Formula 1 car. I think you're promoted to the stock car afterwards. And then you select this old Formula 160 car. And you have the prototypes. Sorry, I'm yawning there. I'm just a little tired. But anyway, let's select this one. Now, you can choose different teams to drive for. So the handling is very similar, I think. There's not much difference between types of handling. This is the Saturn exclusive team. They're just different liveries, really. And so you can choose whichever color appeals to you most, whichever you find more attractive, and take to the road with it. So I'll choose this one. I kind of like the colors of this one, so we'll choose that one. Now, the tracks are as follows. Now, this particular one here is the ice track. It's beautiful. This is the intermediate track. It's the Bay Bridge from the arcade. This is one of the new ones. It's the medium version of the Australia circuit. It's the same as the easy version, but this one's got a slight cut in. As you can see, the track cuts inwards here as it's turning towards us, and it goes around a lake. That's just like a detour. This one goes through canyons. Acropolis, the hard one. This is one of my favorite tracks. It's beautiful. It's like driving through Tokyo at night. It's very nice. It's the Metropolis. Pacific Coast is this is a really difficult track, exclusive to the Saturn. This is the easy one you start off with. It's Amazon Falls. It's basically an oval, and you can really race flat out on this one. Surface Speedway Oval. You see the lake there where the other version of this one cuts around it. This is the easy version. It just goes all the way around. And Big Forest, the arcade easy track. So let's try the Big Forest. Now, when you're in practice, you can either choose Grand Prix drones, no drones, arcade. So let's do some arcade drones, shall we? Now, first of all, we're going to try and concentrate on how to get past the fact that the graphics are non-textured polygons. Now, they are charming. The way to look at them is to think they're stylized. I know there are better looking games on the Saturn, such as Sega Rally, there's Daytona, Sega Touring Car. But we've got to look at this game as a brilliant racing game in its own right. Now, the backgrounds are very attractive there. They're just they're photorealistic. Now, there are different viewpoints, of course, like the arcade. 4 different viewpoints. Here you've got, I think, a few more. Now, the game is smooth. It's very smooth. It's about 30 frames a second. Even if you play it in split screen with your friends, it doesn't lose hardly any speed. And each car handles a little bit differently, and they all handle like a dream. The game is pure pick up and play. There's no like tuning options or simulation aspects here. It's just pure arcade racing. You pick it up and play it. It's as simple as that. Whether it's Grand Prix mode or practice or split screen with your friends, you just pick it up and play it. The music, as you can tell, is very non-intrusive. It's just in the form of snippets, and they start to play as soon as you go through a checkpoint, like so. It's me crashing like a plonker. So yeah, the handling is just very nice to play. There is a slight challenge because there is a difference between each vehicle and how it handles, but it's really nice. Now, in Grand Prix mode, which I won't go into because it is lengthy, obviously, but you start off with a go-kart, and then of course you progress. As you unlock points, you unlock your, let's say, higher divisions where you get promoted, and so you start to drive the more powerful cars. So the more points you earn by coming first, second or third, you know, the more you can accumulate to unlock your higher divisions. Now you can sort of gain points, I think, no matter what position you actually come in, but it's best to try and come first. And anyway, or second or third usually nets you a good few points that you can accumulate. There are some tracks that will challenge you more, so you might not come first in all of them. I certainly can't. There are a couple here that really challenge me. Some of them I even tend to give up on and come back to at a later date. So let's talk about the actual graphics. Now, first of all, the Sega Saturn version it's not a port of the arcade. I don't even think it's designed to be. It's just meant to be a version of Virtua Racing. It's got the raw polygons. It's got the incredible playability of it. Let's try this car. You know what? Tell you what, let's try the fun go-karts. They only do 90 miles an hour, by the way, but they're still really fun. So let's try the ice level. It's got one of in fact, my favourite snippet of music through the second checkpoint. I really love that tune. It really takes me back when I play it. It just takes me right back, and I'm in my 20s again, you know, buying Virtua Racing for the Sega Saturn. Incidentally, the version I'm using to review is the US version, which happens to be region-free. So if you are trying to find this game on eBay or somewhere and you can't find a PAL version, don't worry. Whatever version you buy will work in your Saturn, whether it's modified or not. Let's slow down a bit so you can hear that bit of music from the other checkpoint. It's my favourite. Here we go. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, beautiful bit of music there. Anyway, if my friend Peter's watching this, he'll be laughing his head off. He'll think, typical Michael, his favourite bit of music. He never changes. Now, first of all, let's try and observe these graphics as graphics in their own right. Let's not compare them to the Sega Rallies and the Daytonas of this world, or the Ridge Racers for that matter. Look at them as stylized graphics in their own right. Now, if you own PS4s or Xbox Ones, there are a surprising amount of indie games that are released using that same graphical style, raw, untextured polygons, and they are charming. It just gives the game a much more stylized look. You sort of get immersed into this different world. It's the Virtua world, and you can just imagine yourself being there, where everybody's made up of polygons and everything is made up of polygons. But there is a certain charm about it. It is very charming. If they textured this game, yes, it would look rather incredible, but it would lose some of that charm that it has because of the untextured graphics, polygons. So there's not a great sensation of speed when you're driving the go-karts, but then again, you know, they're the slowest of the bunch. So the other nice touch about Grand Prix mode, I really don't want to spoil too much, because if you haven't played this and you're all collectors, or you're thinking of picking this one up, do. The thing I will say about this game, it's very, very generous, because there is a lot of game in there. I mean, you've got 10 different tracks, which at the time, and when I say at the time, because that was a time when if you had 3 tracks in a racing game, it was good. If you had 5, it was really good. And if you had 6, you'd think, yeah! But this one had 10. And it's just great. Now, it is a simple pick-up and play game. There are no simulation aspects to it. There are no tuning options. You just pick it up and play it. That's all it is, whether it's Grand Prix, arcade, or practice. There are no options for anything, you know, mechanical that you need to tinker with. During Grand Prix mode, there are pit stops that you can make, and you know you're assisted by a fully polygon crew of people. Let's try this car. Let's try a different team. Let's go for a different color. Let's try this one. And let's go to a nice track, one of my favorites, Metropolis. I love this track. It's just like driving at night through Tokyo. Now, I remember when this game was first reviewed, it did have sort of kind of a negative reception because of the presence of Sega Rally and Daytona. But now that we're a few years later, we should do what, you know, we should have done back then. Take it as a game in its own right. Now look at these graphics. I love them. They're stylized. Just think of them as stylized graphics. You're immersed into a completely different world. You know, like when you play Ridge Racer on the PlayStation. You immerse yourself in Ridge City. It's a completely different world with a really cool, funky techno soundtrack. A really nice, friendly sounding announcer. An over-the-top, mad announcer that you would quite easily go out and have a drink with. It's my favourite snippet of music again. And it's the same with the Virtua world. There's just something very charming about it. And look at these graphics. Look at this metropolis, this city. It's really atmospheric, and each track does have its own little atmosphere, its own very special atmosphere. I mean, if you just relax and chill while you're playing it, you can really feel that atmosphere. If you drive on Amazon Falls, it's like you're in the sticky, hot, tropical heat. You're driving through the city here, it's like you've taken a trip to Tokyo, and you're going for a spin around the city at night time. So, stylized graphics, very smooth scrolling, as you can see. It's smooth in split screen as well. It's very fast. And yeah, you can enjoy split screen with your friends, or you can just take turns in driving around various tracks, and you've got 5 different cars to choose from, and it really does truly handle like a dream. There are very few arcade racing games that you can just pick up and play. And I'm not a big simulation guy, really. In fact, I'm really bad at true simulation games. For me, I like the Ridge Racers and the Sega Rallies of this world, and the Virtua Racings, of course. I just like good old-fashioned arcade racing. Now, in Grand Prix mode, preceding each track, there's a very nice, charming voiceover done by a very jolly-sounding young American lady. And she tells you about the tracks, and I won't spoil that for you. I'll let you pick up the game and just enjoy. So yeah, I think, ignoring the fact that you've got Sega Rally and Daytona, both versions of Daytona, and I mean including the CCE edition, Championship Circuit edition, and Sega Touring Car's pretty good. You got Highway 2000, which is quite good. You've got Cyber Speedway, reviewed prior to this one. There are lots of really good quality racing games on the Sega Saturn, but Virtua Racing is a game that does give. I mean, it's a truly generous game. I mean, you've got the regular arcade game that you can play, that's the same as the arcade. The Grand Prix mode, of course, practice, and the other thing is there is a lot of game in this game. It's not just 2 or 3 tracks and 1 or 2 cars. 10 tracks, 5 cars, different modes of play. There's a lot of game here for you, and the cars do truly handle really nicely. There isn't any doubt about it. And they handle differently, depending on which one you choose. They do handle differently, trust me. Let's try the old-fashioned racing game here. Let's go to Amazon Falls, why not? Now, I could go on about this game for ages, but again, I'll just seem biased, but I'm trying to make a truly unbiased review. But if you're going to pick this up, class it as a game in its own right. It's a really good quality racing game with a lot of generous content, and you'll keep coming back to it because of the charm that it has. The sounds, the music, the atmosphere. This is the Amazon Falls track. You got the what looks like, the head face statues from Easter Island. Now, this track is an oval. You can pretty much go flat out on it, so there's hardly any braking to be done here at all. You can take your finger off the throttle briefly to sort of, take you around a slightly sharper bend. And the music is not intrusive. It's not sort of annoying rauque music. It's just very pleasant little ditties that play only when you go through checkpoints. They don't outstay their welcome. They don't get on your nerves. And that's pretty much Virtua Racing for you. So, the big question, is it worth picking up if I'm a collector or if I just want to play a good old retro racing game? Yes, it is. A resounding yes, it is. It's so playable, it's unbelievable. I wish more modern arcade racing games were as playable as this one. I mean, there's one that comes close. There's one called Grabble on the PS4 and Xbox One, which I really like. Yes, there's a little glitch in the sound here. I've never heard it before. This is the first time I've ever heard it since I've owned Virtua Racing. For all these years, since 1995, I've never heard that sound glitch before. But anyway, this is pretty much it. Now, the graphics are not arcade perfect. They're not supposed to be. I really believe that this was designed to be a home version of the arcade game with quite a lot of extras added in terms of the extra tracks, the extra cars that you can choose, and the Grand Prix mode. So they've sort of made it into a fun arcade racing title, and it was a great shame that it was slated in terms of graphics anyway, at least, you know, because of the fact that we had the presence of Sega Rally and Daytona USA and Manx TT. We mustn't forget Manx TT. I'll have to review that one at some point. Manx TT is really good. So those racing games, yes, they were ever present. So they kind of, you know, they cast their huge shadow over Virtua Racing. But there was only one magazine that really gave it the praise that it deserved. And I believe that magazine was Mean Machine Sega. They reviewed Virtua Racing, and they did mention the graphics as a trip through Legoland. But the fact is, they did say what I'm saying now. There's a ton of game in here that, you know, that it offers the player. It's just so much fun. And the fact that anybody can just pick this game up and just play it. And you don't have to be an expert driver. Even if you've never played a driving game before, it's very easy to get to grips with. Nothing in depth when it comes to customization or tuning. The option screen is what it is. You can change your difficulty, the controller. Custom game, there you go. Miles per hour or kilometers. I always like to use kilometers. Track movies on. And award movies. When you come first in a track, you get an award movie. And you get an ending movie as well, which I won't spoil for you. It's nothing special. It's very short, but it's quite funny. Now, the team sets, okay, it's just in terms of the liveries. They're the same liveries, but their names are different. Anyway, let me just try one more thing. So, track movies on. Let's see if we can see at least one track movie, just to round off the review nicely. Right, let's choose this car again. I like this one. Let's choose Canyon Track. Here we go.
Diablo means devil, and that's who must have designed this U.S. track within this Grand Prix circuit. With its massive rock cliffs rising up from the floor of Diablo Canyon, this is one of the most treacherous courses on the tour. It starts deceptively easy with a few turns and a curious detour. I wouldn't use the helicopter view, or you'll look like sausage pizza against those rocks.
I think it's just brilliant. It's such a lovely touch. And there you go. There you have it. That's Virtua Racing. And I really hope you've enjoyed this game. And if you haven't given it a chance all those years ago and you are a collector, give it a try. Give it a spin. It's so worth it. That's my reflection again. And in the meantime, while we're at it, let me show you the Diablo track. Now, I know you saw a fork in the road, and that's not cutlery, by the way. The right-hand detour was the pit lane. Now this one is a slightly harder track to negotiate, so you've got to sort of use your brakes a bit here. Only slightly. And take your finger off the throttle. Now there are tiny little details in some of the tracks, like Amazon Falls. You've got coconuts falling from the trees and you can drive into them. And you know, why not? Let's go into the pit lane. Let's say hello to the pit crew. There you go. Look, little polygon people changing your tyres for you and making the final adjustments. Now they're saying bugger off, so we're off. And there you have it. So, I'm hoping I haven't rambled on too much, but as you can tell, I truly love this game. It deserves much more praise than what it's ever received, at least in terms of the Saturn version. It deserves to be played. It deserves to be tried out. Now, because I'm an old fart, I don't remember if I've mentioned at the beginning of the review. See, there's stuff on the tracks there. That the version I'm using to review the game is the US version. Now, if you don't have a modified Saturn, don't worry, because this is one of the very, very few Saturn games that are region-free. So whether you buy the Japanese version or the American version, it will work in your UK Saturn without any modifications. Now, my Saturn's modified, so I can choose full screen, full speed. But, yeah, if you can't find the PAL version anywhere, do try eBay. Even if they've got the American version or the Japanese one, get it, because it's so worth it. This American version I've got here, I bought all the way back in 1995 when it was first released, and I've had it ever since, and I'm not going to part with it. So there you go. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I don't know what my next game review is going to be, and I don't even know if it's going to be on the Saturn. You'll have to wait for the surprise. But whichever game I choose, it'll be a good one, so don't worry. Anyway, take care of yourselves and each other. I'm sure you've heard that phrasing before. And I hope you stop by again soon, and in a few days I'll put something else up. And so I'll say ciao for now, and you know where you stand with retro.